Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves had spent 6 years in the Army as a small arms repair technician at Fort Benning, Georgia, and she made peace with the fact that her military service would never include the stories other soldiers told. Her days consisted of maintaining rifles, diagnosing malfunctions, and teaching basic marksmanship to new recruits who saw her as just another face in the endless bureaucracy of military life. She'd never deployed, never seen combat, never heard a shot fired in anger. Her war was fought against rust, worn firing pins, and improperly maintained buffer springs. She had accepted that her military career would be defined by grease-stained hands, armory paperwork, and the particular satisfaction of turning a malfunctioning weapon into a perfectly functioning tool. On a humid August morning that started like every other morning in her 6-year career, Maya arrived at the weapons facility at 5:30 hours, before the Georgia sun could turn the metal building into an oven. She unlocked the heavy steel door, disabled the alarm system, and stepped into the familiar smell of gun oil, cleaning solvent, and the faint metallic tang that never quite left spaces where thousands of rounds had been fired. The armory was her domain, rows of weapon racks, workbenches cluttered with tools and parts, targets hanging from the walls showing tight groupings she'd shot during her own range time. This was where she felt most competent, most useful, most herself. She'd been calibrating optics on a batch of M110 semi-automatic sniper rifles that morning, work that required patience and precision. Each scope had to be mounted perfectly, bore-sighted, then test-fired and adjusted until it achieved the exacting standards the military demanded. It was meticulous work that most soldiers found tedious, but Maya loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about the intersection of mechanical precision and mathematical certainty. When she mounted a scope correctly, when the calculations were perfect, the rifle became an extension of pure physics, trajectory, wind drift, bullet drop, all predictable and controllable. She was halfway through the third rifle, making micro-adjustments to the windage, when she sensed someone watching her. The feeling came before the sound, that particular awareness that another person had entered your space. Maya looked up from her work to see a haggard-looking captain she didn't recognize standing in the doorway of the armory. The man's uniform was crisp and properly worn, his boots polished, his bearing unmistakably military. But his eyes told a different story: sleepless nights, stress that went beyond normal deployment fatigue, and something haunted lurking beneath the surface of his controlled expression. He stood in the doorway watching her work for a full minute before speaking, as if measuring whether she could be trusted with whatever he'd come to say. Maya set down her tools slowly, aware that this wasn't a normal visit. In 6 years at Fort Benning, she'd learned to read soldiers. The young privates who came in sheepish about breaking their rifles, the sergeants who treated the armory like a sacred space, the officers who rarely visited unless there was a problem. This captain was different. He had the look of someone who'd come a long distance to ask a question he wasn't sure he should be asking. "Staff Sergeant Reeves?" he asked, his voice rough like he hadn't used it much recently. "Yes, sir," Maya responded, standing to attention reflexively, even though the armory had always felt like neutral ground where rank mattered less than competence. "At ease," he said quickly, almost dismissively. "I'm Captain David Torres. I need to ask you some technical questions, ballistic questions, unusual ones." Maya relaxed slightly but remained wary. Technical questions from officers usually meant someone had broken something expensive or someone up the chain of command had a pet project that would create extra work. "What kind of questions, sir?" Torres stepped fully into the armory, closing the door behind him, not slamming it, but closing it with the deliberate finality of someone who didn't want to be overheard. That single action told Maya this conversation was off the books, unofficial, possibly dangerous. He moved to her workbench and looked down at the partially assembled M110, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that seemed designed to keep them from shaking. What do you know about ballistic performance beyond 3,500 meters with modified semi-automatic platforms? He asked. Maya felt her hands freeze mid-motion, still holding the adjustment tool she'd been using. The question was so specific, so unusual, that it immediately triggered a cascade of thoughts. Rangers typically handled their own weapon specialists. They had some of the best armorers and ballistic experts in the entire military. They certainly didn't consult random armory technicians at training bases about theoretical long-range scenarios that pushed far beyond conventional engagement distances. Standard military sniper doctrine considered anything beyond 1,500 meters an exceptional shot. 3,500 meters was nearly 2.5 miles, a distance where bullets dropped dozens of feet, where wind could push a round completely off target, where the curvature of the earth became a factor in calculations. That's an unusual question, sir, Maya said carefully. Can I ask what this is about? Tor's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the door, then back at her, a man clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more intense. I need to know if it's possible, not theoretically, actually possible, with the right modifications, the right ammunition, the right calculations. Could someone make an accurate shot at that distance with a semi-automatic rifle? Maya's mind raced through the physics. Standard military sniper rifles like the M110 were designed for engagements up to about 800 meters effectively, maybe pushing to 1,000 in ideal conditions. But with modifications, custom barrels, specialized ammunition, advanced optics, and someone who understood the complex mathematics involved, the theoretical maximum range could be extended significantly. She'd actually spent considerable time researching exactly that question during her off hours, working through ballistic calculations and weapon modifications that interested her intellectually, even though they had no practical application to her daily work. It's theoretically possible, she said slowly, but it would require extensive modifications, custom barrel with a specific twist rate, hand-loaded ammunition with very particular ballistic coefficients, advanced computer-assisted ballistic calculations, perfect environmental conditions, and a shooter skilled enough to make microscopic adjustments. Even then, you're talking about a bullet that's in flight for over 5 seconds. A lot can happen in 5 seconds. What about 3,820 meters specifically? Tors asked, and something in his voice made Maya's stomach clench. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was about something that had actually happened. Maya paused, doing the math in her head. That's over 2.33 miles. At that distance, you're dealing with bullet drop measured in hundreds of feet, wind drift that could push the round dozens of yards off target, the Coriolis effect becoming significant. It's beyond anything I've ever heard of being attempted with a semi-automatic platform. She looked at Tors directly. Sir, what is this about? Tors reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. He placed it on her workbench next to the M110 she'd been working on. The photo showed 2 soldiers in full combat gear standing on a mountainside, rocky peaks rising behind them. One was Tors himself, younger, smiling. The other was a lean man with intense eyes and a spotter's scope slung across his chest. That's Sergeant First Class Chris Hammond, Tors said quietly. My spotter, my friend. 3 weeks ago, during an operation in the Hindu Kush, he made a shot the Army says is impossible. Then he vanished. Maya stared at the photograph, her mind trying to process what Tors had just said. The image showed 2 soldiers who clearly trusted each other completely, the kind of bond that only formed in combat, where your life depended on the person next to you. Tors looked different in the photo, less haunted, more alive. The man he'd identified as Hammond had an interesting face, not conventionally handsome, but intelligent, focused, the kind of person who noticed everything. Vanished, Maya repeated, looking up from the photograph. Sir, I don't understand. If he made this shot during an operation, there would be records, after-action reports, witness statements. Tors laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a bitter, exhausted sound that made him seem 10 years older. There are reports, official reports. They say that Sergeant First Class Christopher Hammond was killed in action during a reconnaissance mission in Kunar Province on July 27th. Enemy contact, mountainous terrain, body not recovered due to extreme tactical situation. MIA, presumed KIA. His family's been notified. There's going to be a memorial service next month at Arlington. But you don't believe that, Maya said, and it wasn't a question. No, I don't believe that, Tors confirmed. He pulled out a small tablet from inside his jacket, the kind issued to special operations units for secure communications and tactical planning. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, pulling up files that made Maya's security clearance alarms go off in her head. She could see the classification markers, secret, NOFORN, compartmented program identifiers that meant she probably shouldn't be looking at any of this. Sir, I'm not sure I should, she started. Staff Sergeant Reeves, are you curious about what happened to the research notes you've been keeping in the Armory database? Tors interrupted, looking at her with an intensity that stopped her mid-sentence. The theoretical work on extended-range ballistics, the calculations for custom barrel configurations, the ammunition load specifications for maximum effective distance. Maya felt her face go cold. Those notes were supposed to be private, personal research she conducted during her off-duty hours. She'd stored them on the secure military network because it was safer than keeping them on personal devices, and because she'd figured no one would ever bother looking at a weapons technician's theoretical musings about ballistic physics. It was just intellectual exercise, the kind of problem-solving that kept her mind sharp and engaged when the routine work became too repetitive. How do you know about those? She asked quietly. Tors turned the tablet toward her. The screen showed a document she recognized immediately, her own handwriting, scanned and digitized, covered in mathematical equations and technical diagrams. It was her research on extending the effective range of semi-automatic sniper platforms beyond conventional limits. Months of work, calculations done late at night when she couldn't sleep, theoretical problems solved just because they interested her. Because Hammond accessed them 6 months before our deployment, Tors said. He was doing research for a mission profile we were developing, long-range reconnaissance in mountainous terrain where traditional sniper hides wouldn't work. He needed to understand if it was possible to engage targets at extreme distances with portable weapon systems. Your research was the most comprehensive theoretical framework he could find in the entire military database. He studied it like a textbook. He even reached out to you, but you'd gone on leave, and by the time you returned, we'd already deployed. Maya's mind reeled. Someone had actually read her work. More than that, someone had taken it seriously enough to base operational planning on it. She'd always assumed her research would remain nothing more than theoretical exercises, interesting problems with no practical application. The military moved slowly, conservatively. Revolutionary changes to doctrine and equipment took years, sometimes decades. Yet here was Tors telling her that a ranger had not only read her work, but had used it in actual combat. What happened during this mission? Maya asked, pulling over a stool and sitting down. Her legs suddenly felt unsteady. Tell me everything. Tors set the tablet on the workbench and began to pace, his movements tight and controlled, like a man trying to burn off energy that had nowhere else to go. We were operating in the Hindu Kush, tracking a high-value target who'd been moving weapons across the Pakistan border. Intelligence suggested he was meeting with local Taliban commanders in a remote valley. Our team, 8 Rangers, was inserted for reconnaissance and possible interdiction if the opportunity presented itself. He paused, his jaw working as he gathered his thoughts. The valley was perfect terrain for what we do. Multiple observation points, elevated positions, clear lines of sight. We set up on a ridgeline at about 2,200 meters from the target compound. Standard overwatch position. Hammond was my spotter, running calculations, monitoring wind conditions, all the usual procedures. Everything was by the book. What went wrong? Maya prompted when Tors fell silent. Nothing went wrong with our mission, Tors said. We completed the reconnaissance, confirmed the target was present, called in the strike package. But while we were waiting for extraction, Hammond saw something through his spotting scope that wasn't part of our intelligence brief. A convoy of vehicles arriving at a secondary compound about 1,000 meters further into the valley. He called me over to look. Tors stopped packing and faced Maya directly. There were children being unloaded from those vehicles, not teenagers who might be Taliban recruits. Children, young kids, maybe a dozen of them, tied together, being moved by armed men into a building that our intelligence had listed as abandoned. Maya felt her stomach turn. She'd heard stories about human trafficking in the Afghan provinces, networks that had operated for decades, protected by corruption and tribal politics. It was one of the open secrets of the war, something everyone knew existed, but that rarely made it into official reports because the solutions were complicated and politically dangerous. Hammond wanted to call it in, Tors continued. He wanted authorization to engage to do something. I radioed up the chain. The response came back within 10 minutes. Observe only, do not engage, not part of mission parameters, extraction on schedule. They told us that local authorities would be notified through appropriate channels. Local authorities who were probably part of the trafficking network, Maya said. Exactly, Tors confirmed. Hammond knew it. I knew it. Every person on that ridgeline knew it. Those kids were going to disappear, and our government was going to do nothing because actually stopping it would require admitting we knew about the network, which would require explaining why we hadn't done anything about it before, which would create uncomfortable questions about our relationships with local power brokers. Maya could see where this was going. Hammond didn't follow orders. Not at first, Tors said. He followed orders for about 6 hours. We maintained our position, continued our surveillance, waited for extraction. But the convoy didn't leave. The children stayed in that compound, and Hammond kept calculating. I didn't realize what he was doing at first. I thought he was just running stress calculations, keeping himself occupied. Then he asked me about the effective range of his rifle with the modifications he'd made. What modifications? Maya asked, though she was starting to understand. Tors pulled up another file on the tablet, this one showing detailed photographs of a heavily modified M110 rifle. Maya leaned in, her technical expertise immediately cataloging the changes. Custom barrel, at least 24 inches, probably with a specialized twist rate. Modified bolt carrier group for improved consistency. Enhanced trigger assembly for cleaner brakes. A scope she didn't recognize, probably civilian market, far more sophisticated than standard military optics. The stock had been adjusted, the bipod replaced, even the magazine well showed signs of custom work. He built this based on your research, Tors said. Spent his own money, worked with civilian contractors, did everything off the books. He told me it was for a personal project, long-range target shooting for when he retired. I didn't question it because Hammond was always tinkering with something. This is beautiful work, Maya said quietly, professional admiration mixing with growing dread about what this weapon had been used for. With this configuration and the right ammunition, you could theoretically push the effective range to, well, significantly beyond standard parameters. 3,820 meters, Tors said. That's the distance from our position to the compound where those children were being held. Hammond calculated it down to the centimeter. Factored in the mountain winds, the temperature differential, the air pressure at that altitude, even the Coriolis effect. He spent 2 hours on the math while I tried to talk him out of what I knew he was planning. Maya looked at the photograph of Hammond again. He took the shot. He took the shot, Tors confirmed. One round, I watched through my scope. The target was a man standing guard outside the compound entrance. At that distance, I could barely see him as more than a dark shape against the building. Hammond's bullet was in flight for almost 6 seconds, 6 seconds where anything could have happened, a gust of wind, a calculation error, the target moving. But the round hit exactly where Hammond intended, center mass. The man dropped instantly. And then, Maya asked, though her mouth had gone dry. And then chaos, Torres said. The other guards scattered. We heard shouting even at that distance. Hammond fired 3 more rounds, 3 guards, 3 hits, all at distances beyond anything in the training manuals. The compound emptied. People ran. And in the confusion, those children got out. We watched them run into the hills, scattering like they'd been trained to do. Some of them made it to a village we could see about 2 kilometers away. But Hammond, Maya prompted. Torres' expression darkened. Hammond transmitted one message on our team frequency. Shot confirmed, 3820, 4 targets neutralized, children clear. Then he broke down his position, packed his weapon, and started moving down the ridge. I called after him, ordered him to hold position for extraction. He looked back at me once and said, "This is just the beginning, tell Maya her math works." Then he disappeared into the terrain. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. He mentioned me specifically. By name, Torres confirmed. Which is why I'm here, because Hammond didn't go rogue on impulse. He planned this. And somehow he knew you'd be important to whatever comes next. Maya sat in stunned silence, her mind racing through the implications of what Torres had just revealed. A ranger had used her theoretical research to make an impossible shot, saved children from human traffickers, then vanished after specifically mentioning her name. None of it made sense. She was a weapons technician who'd never met Hammond, never spoken to him, never had any contact beyond the anonymous research notes she'd stored on a secure server. "Sir, I need to understand something," Maya said, choosing her words carefully. "You said Hammond accessed my research 6 months before deployment, but you also said he tried to reach out to me and I was on leave. When exactly did he try to contact me?" Torres pulled up another file on his tablet, this one showing communication logs. February 14th. He sent you 3 emails through the military system. All of them were flagged as undelivered because you were on emergency leave dealing with your mother's surgery. By the time you returned to duty, we'd already deployed to Afghanistan. Maya remembered that leave. Her mother's unexpected heart surgery, 2 weeks in a Baltimore hospital, the stress of wondering if she'd make it through. When she'd finally returned to Fort Benning, she'd been buried under a backlog of work and had never thought to check for messages that might have come in during her absence. The system should have forwarded them, but sometimes things fell through the cracks in military bureaucracy. "What did the emails say?" she asked. "I don't know," Torres admitted. "They were deleted from the server, purged completely, which is unusual for military communications. Someone with serious access would have had to authorize that deletion. But I found references to them in Hammond's personal files, notes he kept on an encrypted drive that I recovered from his gear after he disappeared." Torres swiped through several screens until he found what he was looking for. Hammond wrote in his personal log, "Reached out to SSG Reeves regarding ballistic research applications. No response. Will proceed with contractor consultation but would prefer military collaboration. Her understanding of the physics is beyond anything I've encountered. If mission parameters expand as I suspect they will, her expertise will be essential." "Mission parameters expand," Maya repeated. He was already planning something beyond the official deployment. "That's what I think," Torres said. "And that's why the Army's story about his death doesn't hold up under scrutiny. They claim he was killed during enemy contact, but there was no enemy contact after that shot. They claim his body couldn't be recovered due to tactical situation, but our extraction went perfectly smooth. They claim he died on July 27th, but I have evidence he was alive at least 3 days after that date." Torres pulled out his phone, his personal device, not military issued. He opened the photo gallery and showed Maya a picture that made her breath catch. It was a long-range photograph of a man sitting in what looked like a cave entrance, partially obscured by shadow. The image quality was poor, clearly taken from a significant distance and digitally enhanced, but the figure was identifiable. "That's Hammond," Torres said, "taken on July 30th by a CIA drone operating in the tribal regions along the Pakistan border. The agency was tracking a different target when their analyst noticed this figure. They ran facial recognition and got a 73% match to Hammond. That's not conclusive, but it's enough to raise serious questions." Maya studied the photograph closely. The man in the image was wearing civilian clothes, local Afghan dress, and appeared to be working with some kind of equipment that she couldn't quite make out due to the image resolution. But his posture, the way he held himself, matched the photograph Torres had shown her earlier of Hammond standing on the mountainside. "Did the CIA share this with Army Command?" Maya asked. "No," Torres said flatly, "because officially the CIA wasn't operating drones in that region on that date. This image exists in a gray area of classified operations that no one wants to acknowledge. The analyst who ran the facial recognition did it out of curiosity and immediately realized he'd stumbled onto something politically complicated. He sent the image to a friend of mine who works in intelligence analysis, and she forwarded it to me with a warning to be very careful about what I did with it." Maya set down the phone and looked at Torres directly. "Captain, what exactly are you asking me to do? Because it sounds like you're suggesting we investigate something that multiple levels of military command and intelligence agencies have decided to classify and ignore." "I'm asking you to help me understand what Hammond is doing," Torres said. "Because I don't think he's dead, I don't think he went rogue in the traditional sense, and I don't think he's finished with whatever mission he's actually pursuing. And based on everything I've found, you're the only person who has the technical expertise to track what he's doing." Torres pulled out a small storage drive from his pocket and placed it on Maya's workbench next to the photograph. "This is everything I've collected over the past 3 weeks. Ballistic data from Hammond's last position, equipment requisition records that don't match official reports, communications intercepts from the tribal regions, financial transactions from the months before our deployment. And most importantly, the classified ballistic calculations that were recovered from Hammond's last known location." Maya picked up the drive, feeling the weight of it in her hand, not just the physical weight, but the weight of the decision she was being asked to make. "If I look at this, if I help you with this, we're both putting our careers at risk, possibly worse than that." "I know," Torres said, "and I wouldn't ask if I thought there was any other way, but Maya, can I call you Maya?" She nodded. "Maya, Hammond saved those children. 4 shots at impossible distances, and he saved lives that our government was willing to ignore for political convenience. That should have made him a hero. Instead, he's been erased. And now there's evidence he's still operating out there, still pursuing something, and the military is actively covering it up. I need to know why. I need to know what he discovered that was worth sacrificing everything for." Maya looked down at the M110 rifle on her workbench, the precise mechanical tool she'd been calibrating when Torres walked in. An hour ago, her biggest concern had been whether the windage adjustment was perfectly centered. Now she was holding a storage drive full of classified information about a ranger who'd supposedly died, but was actually alive and operating in one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. "How much time do I have?" she asked. "I'm officially on bereavement leave," Torres said. "I have 48 hours before I have to report back to my unit at Fort Lewis. After that, I'll be preparing for another deployment, and I won't have access to the resources or freedom of movement to continue this investigation. It's now or never." Maya made her decision. She'd spent 6 years playing it safe, following regulations, staying in her lane. And what had it gotten her? A comfortable routine and the nagging feeling that she was capable of more than she was doing. Maybe this was her chance to find out what she was actually capable of when it mattered. "Okay," she said. "I'll help you, but we do this smart. No cowboy operations, no breaking laws we don't absolutely have to break. We follow the evidence and we stay as legitimate as possible." Tors nodded, relief evident on his face. Agreed. Where do we start? Maya plugged the storage drive into her computer and began pulling up files. The first thing she opened was the ballistic data from Hammond's last position, and what she saw made her sit up straight in her chair. The calculations were extraordinary, not just accurate, but showing an understanding of long-range ballistics that went beyond anything in standard military training. Wind drift calculations that accounted for thermal layers at different altitudes. Coriolis effect compensations that factored in the Earth's rotation, with precision usually reserved for artillery, not small arms. Bullet drop predictions that incorporated air density changes across the projectile's entire flight path. This is incredible, Maya said, scrolling through the data. Hammond didn't just use my research, he expanded on it. He found applications and refinements I never considered. Can you tell where he learned this? Tors asked, leaning over her shoulder. Maya pulled up another file, this one showing equipment specifications. Her eyes widened as she recognized components and modifications that shouldn't have been available through military channels. These parts. This scope system alone costs more than $40,000. This ammunition isn't military issue. It's custom competition-grade rounds that cost about $15 per bullet. Hammond invested serious money into this system. She opened another folder and found financial records, bank statements, wire transfers, purchase orders from civilian contractors. Hammond had spent over $120,000 over the course of 8 months, acquiring equipment and expertise that the military either couldn't or wouldn't provide. Where did he get this kind of money? Maya asked. A sergeant first class doesn't make enough to casually drop 6 figures on a personal project. Tors' expression darkened. That's one of the things I was hoping you could help me figure out, because according to his official financial records, Hammond's bank account never showed more than $8,000 at any given time, yet somehow he was making purchases like this. Maya pulled up the purchase orders and began cross-referencing them against dates and locations. One name kept appearing across multiple transactions: Eugene Park, Precision Gunsmith, Fayetteville, North Carolina. She typed the name into a search engine and found a professional website showing custom rifle builds, testimonials from competitive shooters, and a location less than 2 hours from Fort Benning. I think we need to visit North Carolina, Maya said. Maya and Tors left Fort Benning at 600 hours the next morning, driving Tors' personal vehicle, a nondescript gray sedan that wouldn't draw attention. They'd agreed to take leave for the trip, making it unofficial and off the books. Maya had told her supervisor she needed personal time for a family matter. Tors was already on bereavement leave. As far as the Army was concerned, they were both dealing with private issues and would be back in 48 hours. The drive to Fayetteville, North Carolina, took them through the back roads of Georgia and South Carolina, past pine forests and small towns that looked frozen in time. Tors drove while Maya worked on her laptop, diving deeper into the files he'd given her. The financial trail was complex. Wire transfers routed through multiple accounts, purchases made under different names, a pattern of deliberate obfuscation that suggested Hammond had been very careful about hiding his activities. He knew someone would eventually investigate, Maya said, staring at the screen. These transactions are hidden, but not so hidden that a determined investigator couldn't find them. It's almost like he wanted to leave a trail, but only for someone who was specifically looking for it. Hammond was always thinking 3 steps ahead, Tors replied, keeping his eyes on the road. In Afghanistan, he'd predict enemy movements before they happened, identify patterns no one else saw. It drove our team's sergeant crazy because Hammond would suggest courses of action based on hunches that turned out to be right more often than not. Maya found another folder labeled Project Specifications and opened it. Inside were detailed technical drawings of rifle modifications, ammunition load data, and ballistic performance projections. As she studied the documents, she realized she was looking at a complete weapons system designed from the ground up for extreme-range precision shooting. Every component had been carefully selected and tested, every modification documented and analyzed. "This is military-grade research and development," Maya said, impressed despite herself. Hammond approached this like an engineering project. He identified the performance parameters he needed, worked backward to determine what modifications would achieve those parameters, then systematically built and tested the system. This represents hundreds of hours of work. He spent every spare moment on it for almost a year, Tors confirmed. "I thought he was just really into long-range shooting as a hobby. I never realized he was building something for a specific operational purpose." They arrived in Fayetteville around 1,000 hours and found Eugene Park's shop in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. The building was unremarkable, a metal-sided structure with a small parking lot and a discreet sign reading Park Precision Arms. Security cameras covered the entrance and parking area. A small placard on the door indicated the business was open by appointment only. Tors had called ahead, identifying himself as a military colleague of Hammond's and requesting a consultation about custom rifle work. Park had agreed to meet them, though his voice on the phone had been cautious, non-committal. They knocked on the heavy steel door and waited. After a moment, they heard locks disengaging, and the door opened to reveal a compact man in his mid-50s with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in the military. Eugene Park looked them over with sharp, assessing eyes before stepping aside to let them enter. "Captain Tors," Park said, offering his hand, "and you must be the weapons specialist he mentioned on the phone." "Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves," Maya replied, shaking his hand and nodding the firm, confident grip. Park led them into a workspace that was part machine shop, part laboratory. Precision tools hung on the walls in organized rows. Several rifles in various stages of assembly rested on padded workbenches. A sophisticated computer system occupied one corner, likely running ballistic modeling software. The whole space spoke of meticulous attention to detail and serious expertise. "I was sorry to hear about Sergeant Hammond," Park said, gesturing for them to sit at a small table in the corner of the shop. "He was a good man, very focused, very dedicated to his craft." "We're actually here because we don't think Hammond is dead," Tors said directly, deciding that honesty was the best approach with someone who'd clearly worked in the special operations community. Park's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed his posture shift slightly, a subtle tensing that suggested Tors' statement hadn't surprised him. "What makes you think that?" Tors showed him the photograph from the CIA drone. Park studied it carefully, then handed it back without comment. "Even if that were true, I'm not sure what you'd expect me to tell you. Client confidentiality is important in my business. People come to me for work they can't get done through official channels. If I started talking about every customer, I'd be out of business in a week." "Mr. Park," Maya said, leaning forward, "we're not trying to get Hammond in trouble. We're trying to understand what he's involved in. Lives may be at stake, not just his, but others. Children specifically." That got a reaction. Park's eyes narrowed, and he studied Maya more carefully. Hammond mentioned children, not directly, but in passing. He said he was preparing for a mission that would involve protecting innocents in a complicated tactical environment. I assumed he was talking about standard counterinsurgency operations. "It was more than that," Tors said. He explained what had happened in the Hindu Kush, the trafficking convoy, Hammond's impossible shots, and his subsequent disappearance. As he spoke, Park's expression grew darker. When Tors finished, Park was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to a filing cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a thick folder. He returned to the table and placed it in front of them. "Hammond came to me 11 months ago," Park began. "Said he'd found research about extending the effective range of semi-automatic sniper platforms and wanted to know if the theory could be translated into practice. He showed me Staff Sergeant Reeves's work. Impressive stuff, by the way. Very sound theoretical foundation. Thank you, Maya said quietly. We spent 3 months developing the system, Park continued. I built the rifle, tested different barrel configurations, worked with ammunition manufacturers to develop custom loads. Hammond was here almost every weekend, shooting at my private range, collecting data, refining the calculations. The man was obsessed with achieving consistent accuracy at distances most people consider impossible. Park opened the folder and showed them photographs of the rifle they'd seen in Tor's files, along with performance data from test firings. We eventually achieved reliable sub-MOA accuracy out to 3,000 meters in controlled conditions. Beyond that, environmental factors made consistency difficult, but it was still theoretically possible with the right calculations and conditions. You said he paid for 2 rifles, Tors prompted, remembering what Maya had discovered in the financial records. Park nodded slowly. That's correct. The first rifle was completed in April and Hammond took it with him when he deployed. The second rifle, he paused, seeming to wrestle with how much to reveal. The second rifle was completed in late June. Hammond had already deployed by then, but he'd left instructions for where to ship it. He paid in advance, a cashier's check for $60,000. Where did you ship it? Maya asked, her heart rate accelerating. Park pulled out a shipping receipt. To a private mailbox service in Durango, Colorado. The package was picked up on July 28th, one day after Hammond was officially declared killed in action. Tors and Maya exchanged glances. July 28th. The day after Hammond's supposed death, someone had picked up a custom-built extreme-range rifle in Colorado. Did Hammond ever explain why he needed 2 identical rifles? Maya asked. Not explicitly, Park said, but he mentioned something about contingency planning. He said that the mission he was preparing for wouldn't end in Afghanistan, that it was part of a larger operation that would require continued engagement across multiple theaters. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I'm not so sure. Tors leaned forward intently. Did he give you any indication of what this larger operation was? Any specifics about targets or objectives? Park hesitated, then pulled out another document from the folder, a map of Central and South Asia with various locations marked. Hammond asked me about ballistic performance in different environmental conditions, mountain elevations ranging from 2,000 to 4,000 meters above sea level, temperature ranges from -20 to +40 Celsius, humidity variations. He wanted to know if the rifle system would perform consistently across all these conditions. Maya studied the map, nodding the marked locations. They spread across Afghanistan, Pakistan, parts of Iran, and Central Asian republics. This isn't one mission. This is a campaign. That's what I eventually realized, Park confirmed. Hammond wasn't building a rifle for a specific engagement. He was building a weapon system for an extended operation across a massive geographic area. When he left with the first rifle, he told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said, "Some evils are too big for official channels to handle. Sometimes you need someone willing to operate in the spaces the government pretends don't exist." Tors sat back in his chair, processing the implications. He was planning to go rogue from the beginning. The deployment to Afghanistan was just the starting point. I think he was planning something more sophisticated than going rogue, Maya said, her mind working through the evidence. Everything we've seen suggests careful planning, significant financial resources, and access to intelligence beyond what a single ranger would normally have. Hammond didn't just wake up one day and decide to become a vigilante. This is organized, funded, and supported. Supported by whom? Tors asked. That's the question, Maya replied. She turned to Park. Mr. Park, you said Hammond paid you $60,000 in a cashier's check. Did you see where the check came from? Park nodded and pulled out a copy of the check from the folder. The issuing bank was a small private institution in the Cayman Islands. the kind of bank that specialized in privacy and discretion for wealthy clients. Offshore banking, Torres said. Someone with serious resources is funding Hammond's operation. Maya photographed the check with her phone, already thinking about how to trace it. Mr. Park, we need the address in Colorado where you shipped the second rifle, and anything else you can tell us about Hammond's plans. Park wrote down the Durango address on a piece of paper and handed it to her. That's all I know about the location. As for his plans, he paused, choosing his words carefully. The last time I saw Hammond, about 2 weeks before he deployed, he seemed different, resolved. He told me he discovered something during his previous deployment that convinced him the official mission was missing the bigger picture. He said there was a network operating across the region, protected by corruption and political considerations, and that traditional military operations would never be able to stop it. The trafficking network, Maya said. He never used those words specifically, but yes, I believe that's what he was referring to, Park confirmed. He said children were being hurt, and no one with the power to stop it was willing to act, so he was going to act instead. Torres stood and offered his hand. Mr. Park, thank you for your honesty. If anyone asks, we were never here. Park shook his hand. Captain, one more thing. Hammond left something with me. Instructions to give it to you if you ever came asking questions. He walked to the filing cabinet again and retrieved a sealed envelope. He said you'd figure it out eventually because you were too stubborn and too loyal to let it go. Torres took the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. He opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in Hammond's handwriting. As he read it, his face went pale. What does it say? Maya asked. Torres handed her the letter. Maya read Hammond's precise script. Torres, if you're reading this, then you've already started down the path I couldn't explain before I left. I'm sorry for the deception, but some things couldn't be shared until you were ready to understand. The mission in Afghanistan was just the beginning. What I discovered there is bigger than one trafficking network, bigger than one region. I'm pursuing it because no one else will, and because those children deserve someone willing to fight for them outside the constraints of politics and policy. Maya Reeves's research made the impossible shot possible. Now that same research will help finish what I started. The second rifle is in Durango at the address Park gave you. You'll find everything you need to understand there. But Torres, you need to decide if you're willing to cross the line I've crossed, because once you do, there's no going back. Some of us have to operate in the darkness so others can live in the light. I've made my choice. Now you have to make yours. Hammond. Maya looked at Torres. We're going to Colorado, aren't we? We're going to Colorado, Torres confirmed. Maya and Torres drove through the night, taking turns behind the wheel as they crossed from North Carolina through Tennessee and into the vast expanse of the American Midwest. They pushed hard, stopping only for gas and quick meals grabbed from drive-thrus, both of them driven by the urgency of Hammond's letter and the ticking clock of Torres' 48-hour leave. The landscape changed from green forests to flat plains to the dramatic rise of the Rocky Mountains as they approached Colorado. Maya used the driving time to dig deeper into the financial records on her laptop, tracing the web of transactions that had funded Hammond's operation. The more she uncovered, the more convinced she became that Hammond wasn't working alone. The money trail was too sophisticated, too carefully structured for a single soldier to have arranged. Someone with serious financial expertise and substantial resources was backing him. I found something, Maya said as Torres drove through the pre-dawn darkness of Kansas. The cashier's check Park received came from a Cayman Islands bank, but I traced the account numbers through some publicly available corporate records. The money originated from a charitable foundation called the Sentinel Initiative. Never heard of it, Torres said, keeping his eyes on the empty highway stretching ahead. Neither had I, Maya replied, typing rapidly. But according to their tax filings, they're a private foundation focused on international humanitarian work and child welfare advocacy. They've been operating for about 8 years, with an endowment of roughly $200 million. Their public activities include funding orphanages, supporting anti-trafficking organizations, and lobbying for stricter international laws against human trafficking. Sounds legitimate, Torres observed. On the surface, yes, Maya agreed. But look at their leadership structure. The board of directors includes 3 retired CIA officers, 2 former State Department officials who specialized in Central Asian affairs, and a retired Army colonel who commanded Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan for 6 years. These aren't typical humanitarian aid workers. Torres processed that information. You think this foundation is a front for something else? I think it's exactly what it claims to be: humanitarian work and child welfare advocacy, Maya said. But I also think they've decided that traditional methods aren't enough. They're funding direct action operations like Hammond's to accomplish what legal channels can't. She pulled up more documents on her screen. Look at their grant history. Over the past 3 years, they've made substantial payments to organizations and individuals in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, and several African countries. Most of the payments are listed as consulting fees or field research grants. But the amounts are significant, anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000 per payment. You think those payments are funding operations like Hammond's, Torres said. I think the Sentinel Initiative has operatives all over the world, working outside official channels to disrupt trafficking networks that governments won't or can't touch, Maya replied. Hammond isn't a lone vigilante. He's part of an organized effort, backed by serious money and intelligence support. They reached Durango, Colorado around noon on their second day of driving, exhausted but fueled by adrenaline and coffee. The address Park had given them led to a property about 15 miles outside the town proper, accessible only by a winding dirt road that climbed into the forested foothills of the San Juan Mountains. The isolation was deliberate. This was a place chosen specifically for privacy and security. The cabin itself was small and well-maintained, a single-story structure built from weathered logs with solar panels on the roof and a satellite dish mounted on a pole beside it. Torres parked 100 meters away and they approached on foot, both of them operating on instinct honed by military training. The cabin appeared deserted, but fresh tire tracks in the dirt suggested someone had been there recently. Torres tried the door and found it unlocked, another deliberate choice. They entered carefully, Torres taking point while Maya followed, both of them alert for any signs of danger. The interior was sparse but functional. A single room combining living space and work area, a small kitchen alcove, a bathroom, and what appeared to be a sleeping loft accessed by a ladder. But it was the work area that immediately captured their attention. An entire wall was covered with maps, topographical charts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and surrounding regions. Each map was marked with hundreds of pins in different colors, connected by strings creating a complex web of locations and routes. Notes in Hammond's handwriting covered the margins, dates and names and cryptic references that would mean nothing to anyone not deeply familiar with the region. Maya moved closer to examine the maps while Torres searched the rest of the cabin. The pins seemed to mark specific locations, compounds, border crossings, routes through mountain passes. The colored strings connected them in patterns that suggested movement of people and goods. This was a trafficking network mapped out in extraordinary detail. Maya, look at this, Torres called from the kitchen area. He'd found a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard, and inside was a laptop computer, several external hard drives, and a satellite phone. Maya opened the laptop, half expecting it to be password protected, but it booted directly to the desktop. Hammond had wanted whoever found this place to access the information easily. The desktop was organized into folders labeled by country and date. Maya opened the Afghanistan folder first. Inside were hundreds of files, intelligence reports, surveillance photographs, intercepted communications, financial records, and detailed profiles of individuals involved in the trafficking network. The level of detail was astounding, far beyond what any single individual could have gathered alone. This was professional intelligence work, the kind produced by agencies with significant resources and capabilities. "This isn't just Hammond's work," Maya said, scrolling through the documents. "This is intelligence product from multiple sources: satellite imagery, signals intercepts, human intelligence reports. Someone with access to serious capabilities has been feeding Hammond information." Tors looked over her shoulder at the screen. "The Sentinel Initiative." "Has to be," Maya agreed. She opened another folder labeled Operations Log and found a detailed journal Hammond had kept, documenting his activities over the past 8 months. She began reading aloud. November 15. Arrived Colorado Safe House. Established communications with Sentinel Control. Received updated intelligence package on northern network routes. Beginning planning for Phase 2 operations. December 3. Completed advanced surveillance training with Sentinel instructor, former Delta, 20 years experience. Learned new techniques for operating in denied areas without support. January 20. Received confirmation that second rifle completed and ready for shipment. Paid Park final installment. Weapon system will provide necessary capability for extended operations. February 10. Sentinel Intelligence confirms network moving high-value assets through Kunar Province next month. Timing aligns with scheduled deployment. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. Maya scrolled further through the journal, finding entries that documented Hammond's growing obsession with stopping the trafficking network. He'd witnessed things during his previous deployments that had changed him fundamentally: children being sold, families destroyed, corruption protecting the traffickers at every level. The official military missions he'd been part of had achieved tactical objectives, but ignored the deeper humanitarian crisis. Hammond had decided he couldn't ignore it anymore. The later entries grew more specific about operational planning. June 15. Deployed to Afghanistan with 75th Ranger Regiment. Official mission is counterinsurgency operations in Kunar Province. Actual mission begins now. July 10. Confirmed target location through Sentinel Intelligence. Network moving major shipment of victims through Valley Complex. 30 to 40 children, ages 6-14. Local authorities compromised. International pressure ineffective. This is what we trained for. July 27 made the shot, 3,820 meters. Maya's calculations were perfect. 4 targets neutralized. Children escaped. Tors saw everything. Had to leave him behind. He's too good a soldier to cross this line, but he'll understand eventually. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Tors read the last entry, his jaw tight with emotion. He knew what he was asking me to do by disappearing. He knew I'd come looking. Maya found more folders containing operational plans for what Hammond had labeled Phase 2 through Phase 5. Each phase targeted different aspects of the trafficking network: financial infrastructure, leadership, transportation routes, safe houses. The plans were detailed and professional, clearly developed with expert assistance. But they also showed something else. Hammond wasn't planning to stop. This was a campaign that would take months, possibly years, moving across multiple countries and engaging dozens of targets. "He's conducting his own private war," Maya said quietly, "and the Sentinel Initiative is providing everything he needs to do it." She opened another folder labeled Support Team and found profiles of other individuals: former military personnel, intelligence officers, technical specialists. Each profile included their expertise, their motivation for joining the operation, and their current assignment. Maya recognized some of the names from her research on the Sentinel Initiative's board of directors. "This isn't just Hammond," she said, showing Tors the profiles. "There are at least 20 people involved in this operation at various levels, some providing intelligence, others handling logistics, some doing the actual field work. It's a complete shadow organization operating parallel to official government efforts. Tors found a small lockbox in the sleeping loft and brought it down. Inside was a personal letter addressed to him, along with another letter addressed to Maya. He handed her the envelope with her name on it. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Hammond's handwriting filled 2 pages. Staff Sergeant Reeves, if you're reading this, then Captain Tors trusted you enough to bring you into something that will probably cost both of you your careers and possibly your freedom. I'm sorry for that. I never wanted to drag anyone else into this darkness. But the truth is, I need your help. The shot I made at 3,820 meters proved your research works in practice, not just theory. But I'm facing targets at even greater distances now, in more challenging conditions with higher stakes. I need you to push the envelope further. I need calculations for shots beyond 4,000 meters in mountain environments with variable conditions. I need to understand the absolute limits of what's possible with this weapon system. The people I'm hunting hide behind distance and geography, thinking they're safe. Your expertise can prove them wrong. There's a satellite phone in the equipment case. If you're willing to help, not with boots on the ground, but with the technical knowledge that makes the impossible possible, call the number programmed into it. Someone from Sentinel will answer. They'll explain everything I can't put in a letter. You have a gift, Maya, a mind that sees possibilities others miss. I'm asking you to use that gift for children who have no other hope. This is your decision. Tors will support whatever you choose. But those children don't have the luxury of waiting for official channels to work. They need someone willing to act now. The second rifle is in the equipment locker behind the false wall in the bathroom. Everything you need to understand the full scope of the operation is on the laptop. I hope you'll join us, but if you can't, I understand. Just please don't stop Tors from doing what his conscience tells him is right. Some of us have to step into the darkness so others don't have to. Chris Hammond. Maya finished reading and looked up to find Tors watching her intently. He's asking us to join his operation, she said. I know, Tors replied. The question is, are we going to do it? Maya walked to the maps on the wall, studying the network of pins and strings. Somewhere behind each of those pins were children in danger, families being destroyed, evil operating with impunity because official channels moved too slowly or not at all. She'd spent 6 years in the Army working in the safe, predictable environment of an armory. She'd never imagined her theoretical research would be used for something like this. But she'd also never imagined she'd have the opportunity to make a real difference in the world, to use her expertise for something that truly mattered. We need to find that satellite phone, Maya said finally, and we need to understand exactly what we'd be getting into before we make any decisions. Tors nodded and began searching for the equipment case Hammond had mentioned. They were standing at a crossroads, and whatever choice they made next would change everything. They found the equipment case behind a false wall panel in the bathroom, exactly where Hammond's letter had indicated. Tors pulled it out carefully, a military-grade Pelican case, waterproof and shock-resistant, secured with a combination lock. The code was written on a small piece of tape on the lid, 3820. Hammond's impossible shot, now serving as the key to his secret operation. Inside the case, packed in dense foam, was the second rifle, a twin to the one Hammond had taken to Afghanistan. Maya lifted it carefully, her professional eye immediately appreciating the craftsmanship. Eugene Park had built something extraordinary. Every component was precision machined, every surface finished to perfection. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a work of art designed for a terrible purpose. Beneath the rifle lay ammunition boxes containing custom-loaded rounds, each bullet labeled with specific ballistic data. There were also several smartphones, the satellite phone Hammond had mentioned, encrypted USB drives, and a thick envelope marked for Tors, open first. Tors opened the envelope and found cash, $50,000 in hundreds, along with credit cards in false names and a detailed operational manual. He flipped through the manual, his expression growing more serious with each page. It covered everything: communication protocols, operational security procedures, emergency extraction plans, financial resources, and contact information for the Sentinel Initiative Support Network. "This is a complete operational package," Tors said quietly. "Hammond didn't just plan his own mission. He planned for us to continue it if necessary." Maya found the satellite phone and turned it on. It was already charged, already configured. A single number was programmed into the contacts, labeled simply Sentinel. She stared at the phone, her thumb hovering over the call button, knowing that making this call would be crossing a line she could never uncross. "We should look at everything first," Maya said, setting the phone aside. "Understand the full picture before we make contact." They spent the next 3 hours going through every file on the laptop, every document in the case, every piece of intelligence Hammond had compiled. The scope of the operation was staggering. The trafficking network they were tracking wasn't just an Afghan phenomenon. It was international, with roots stretching from Central Asia through the Middle East and into Europe. Children were being kidnapped or purchased from desperate families, then moved through a sophisticated pipeline that exploited border corruption, diplomatic blind spots, and the chaos of ongoing conflicts. The network's leadership consisted of a dozen key individuals, warlords, corrupt officials, and organized crime figures who'd formed an unholy alliance based on profit. Each leader controlled different aspects of the operation: border crossings, safe houses, transportation, buyers. Take out any single leader, and the others would simply adjust. But eliminate them systematically, disrupting the network's operations at multiple points simultaneously, and the entire structure could collapse. Hammond's operational plan was designed to do exactly that. Phase 2, which he'd apparently begun after his death in Afghanistan, targeted the network's financial infrastructure, shell companies, money laundering operations, and corrupt banking officials who facilitated the transactions. Phase 3 would target transportation choke points, border crossings, and mountain passes where victims were moved between regions. Phase 4 focused on safe houses and holding facilities. Phase 5 was the endgame, eliminating the leadership simultaneously across multiple countries. "This is asymmetric warfare applied to criminal networks," Tors said, reading through the operational plans. "Hammond is using special operations tactics against an enemy that operates outside the law. He's become exactly the kind of operator the government claims doesn't exist." Maya found a folder labeled Success Metrics and opened it. Inside were reports documenting operations Hammond and other Sentinel operatives had already completed. Over the past 8 months, they'd disrupted 17 trafficking operations, rescued 143 children, eliminated 32 key network personnel, and seized over $20 million in assets. The operations had been conducted across 6 countries, by operatives Hammond never named but whose work he documented meticulously. "They're winning," Maya said, showing Tors the reports. "Whatever we think about their methods, they're actually making a difference. These are children who would have disappeared into slavery or worse. Now they're free." Tors studied the reports, his expression conflicted. But at what cost? Hammond has become judge, jury, and executioner. The Sentinel Initiative is conducting extrajudicial killings across multiple countries. This isn't law enforcement or military action. It's vigilantism with sophisticated backing. "Is it?" Maya challenged. "Or is it the only effective response to a problem that governments refuse to address? How many official reports have documented this trafficking network? How many diplomatic initiatives have been proposed? How many children have died while politicians debated the proper channels for action?" She pulled up a document showing intelligence reports that had been submitted to various government agencies over the past 5 years: CIA, State Department, Defense Intelligence Agency, even the United Nations. Each report documented the trafficking network in detail. Each report resulted in meetings, discussions, policy papers, but actual action, minimal. The political complications, the diplomatic sensitivities, the fear of creating incidents in unstable regions. All of it combined to produce paralysis while children suffered. Hammond didn't go rogue because he's a criminal, Maya continued. He went rogue because the system failed, because being a good soldier meant following orders that left children in danger, because someone had to choose between their conscience and their career, and he chose his conscience. Tors sat down heavily on a wooden chair, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Maya, if we do this, if we actually join this operation, we're not just risking our careers, we're risking prison. We could be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, violations of international law, working with an unauthorized paramilitary organization. We could spend the rest of our lives in Leavenworth. I know, Maya said quietly. But if we don't do this, if we walk away and pretend we never found any of this, how many children will suffer because we chose safety over action? She picked up the satellite phone again, staring at it. I became a weapons technician because I love the precision of it, the way everything fits together perfectly when you understand the mathematics and mechanics. I thought that was my contribution to the military, keeping weapons functional, teaching others to shoot straight. Safe, predictable, useful but not remarkable. Maya looked at Tors directly. Then Hammond used my research to save children at an impossible distance. He proved that my theoretical work has real-world applications that can change lives. And now he's asking me to push even further, to help make possible shots that could save even more lives. How do I walk away from that? How do I go back to the armory and spend the rest of my career calibrating scopes, knowing I could have done something that actually mattered? Tors stood and walked to the maps on the wall, studying the network of pins and strings. I joined the Rangers because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, to be part of something meaningful. He touched one of the pins on the map. But most of what we do in Afghanistan is tactical. Eliminate this target, secure this area, conduct this patrol. We follow orders, complete missions, move to the next objective. We're not allowed to ask about the bigger picture or question whether our missions actually accomplish anything lasting. He turned back to Maya. Hammond asked those questions. He saw the bigger picture, and when he realized the official mission was missing something critical, he had the courage to do something about it. So what do we do? Maya asked. Tors was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the decision. Finally, he reached out and took the satellite phone from Maya's hand. We make the call. We listen to what the Sentinel Initiative has to say. We ask questions, and then we decide whether this is something we can support. He pressed the call button. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, professional and calm. Sentinel Operations, authentication code, please. Tors looked at the operational manual Hammond had left and found the authentication protocol. Ranger 27, verification 3820. Authenticated, is this Captain Tors? Yes, I'm here with Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves. We found the Colorado safe house and Hammond's operational package. Understood, please hold for Director Castellano. There was a brief pause. Then a different voice came on the line, male, older, with the kind of authority that came from decades of command experience. Captain Tors, Staff Sergeant Reeves, I'm Director Marcus Castellano, Sentinel Initiative Operations Director. Before we proceed, I need to be clear about what you've discovered and what I'm about to tell you. Everything we discuss is classified information regarding an unauthorized operation. If you're recording this conversation or if you intend to report any of this to official channels, tell me now and we'll end this call. Tors looked at Maya. She nodded. We're not recording and we haven't decided what we're going to do with this information yet, Tors said. But we need answers. What exactly is the Sentinel Initiative and what is Hammond really doing? Fair questions, Castellano replied. The Sentinel Initiative is a privately funded organization dedicated to combating human trafficking through direct action when official channels fail. We're staffed by former military, intelligence, and law enforcement personnel who became frustrated with bureaucratic paralysis and political cowardice. We operate outside legal frameworks, which makes us criminals in the eyes of the law, but we're effective criminals. Over the past 8 years, we've rescued more than 800 children and dismantled trafficking networks in 14 countries. By killing people, Maya said bluntly. By eliminating threats, Castellano corrected. We don't target indiscriminately. Every operation is carefully planned and executed against individuals directly responsible for trafficking operations. We gather intelligence, verify targets, and act only when we have high confidence. Our operatives are professionals who understand rules of engagement, even if those rules aren't officially sanctioned. How did Hammond get involved? Torres asked. He found us, Castellano said. 3 years ago, during his second deployment to Afghanistan, Hammond witnessed a trafficking operation and reported it through official channels. Nothing happened. He reported it again. Still nothing. So he started investigating on his own, and eventually his investigation led him to evidence of our operations in the region. He reached out, we vetted him extensively, and eventually he joined our network. And you funded his operation, Maya added. The custom rifle, the equipment, the intelligence support. We provided resources for an operative who demonstrated exceptional capability and commitment, Castellano confirmed. Hammond's skills made him ideal for long-range interdiction operations, but he needed technical support to achieve the ranges necessary for his mission profile. That's where Staff Sergeant Reeves's research became invaluable. Maya felt a chill run through her. You knew about my research. You had Hammond access it. We knew about it because we monitor military research that has potential applications for our operations, Castellano said. Your work on extreme-range ballistics was exactly what Hammond needed. We facilitated his access to your files and encouraged him to reach out to you directly. Unfortunately, timing didn't work out for that contact. You manipulated all of this, Torres said, anger creeping into his voice. Hammond's operation, our investigation leading us here, this was all planned. Partially planned, Castellano admitted. We anticipated that if Hammond's operation went as designed, someone would eventually investigate his disappearance. We hoped it would be you, Captain Torres, because Hammond trusted you, and because your skills make you valuable to our operations. And we hoped you'd be smart enough to bring Staff Sergeant Reeves, because we need her expertise for the next phase of operations. You're recruiting us, Maya said. I'm offering you the opportunity to continue Hammond's work, Castellano replied. The trafficking network is on the defensive now, but they're adapting. They're moving operations deeper into remote areas, using greater distances for protection. We need technical expertise to maintain our operational effectiveness. Staff Sergeant Reeves, your knowledge could save dozens of lives over the next 6 months. Captain Torres, your leadership and tactical experience could coordinate operations across multiple theaters. And if we say no, Torres asked. Then you walk away, Castellano said simply. We won't stop you. We won't threaten you. You'll go back to your units, finish your military service, and hopefully sleep well knowing you made the choice that felt right to you. The operation will continue without you, though less effectively. More children will suffer, but that won't be your fault. It'll be the fault of a system that values rules over results. Maya looked at Torres, seeing her own internal struggle reflected in his face. This was the moment, the decision that would define everything that came after. We need time to think, Torres said finally. You have 12 hours, Castellano replied. After that, we'll assume you've decided against involvement and we'll erase all evidence connecting you to this location. Call this number when you're ready to give us your answer. The line went dead. Torres and Maya sat in silence in the Colorado cabin, surrounded by maps of suffering and evidence of Hammond's war against it, facing the hardest decision of their lives. Maya and Torres spent the next 6 hours in the Colorado cabin, barely speaking, each wrestling privately with the decision that lay before them. Tors paced constantly, moving between the maps on the wall and the window overlooking the forest, his military discipline warring with the moral clarity Hammond's operation represented. Maya sat at the laptop, reviewing the operational files again and again, looking for some reason to justify walking away, but finding only more evidence of children saved and networks disrupted. As darkness fell over the mountains, Tors finally broke the silence. "My father was a police officer in El Paso," he said quietly, still staring out the window. "He spent 30 years enforcing the law, following procedure, doing everything by the book. And he watched as cartels operated with impunity just across the border, protected by corruption and jurisdictional complications. It ate at him. He'd arrest someone in the morning, and they'd be back on the street by evening, because the system couldn't or wouldn't prosecute effectively." He turned to face Maya. "When I joined the army, I thought I was choosing something different. Clear missions, clear enemies, clear results. But it turns out the system's complications extend everywhere. Rules of engagement that protect enemies, political considerations that prevent action, bureaucracy that values process over outcomes. My father died frustrated and bitter. I don't want to end up the same way." Maya understood what he was saying. "You want to do this." "I want to do something that matters," Tors said. "I want to look back on my life and know I chose to act when action was needed, even if that choice cost me everything else. What about you?" Maya closed the laptop and stood, moving to the equipment case where the second rifle lay in its foam cradle. She picked it up again, feeling the perfect balance, the precision engineering, the potential it represented. "I spent 6 years believing that my contribution to the military was adequate, that maintaining weapons and teaching marksmanship was enough. But Hammond proved that my work could be so much more. He turned theoretical research into practical application that saved lives." She set the rifle down carefully. "If I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what more I could have accomplished, wondering how many children might have been saved if I'd been brave enough to cross the line Hammond crossed." Tors checked his watch. "We have 6 hours before Castellano's deadline. If we're going to do this, we should understand exactly what we're committing to." They spent the remaining time studying Phase 3 of Hammond's operational plan in detail. The targets were a series of mountain passes and border crossings used to move trafficking victims from Afghanistan into Pakistan, and then onward into Central Asia. The traffickers had established a rotating schedule, varying their routes and timing to avoid detection, but Sentinel intelligence had identified patterns. The next major movement was scheduled for 4 days from now. A convoy carrying between 20 and 30 children through a pass in the Hindu Kush at an elevation of nearly 4,000 meters. Hammond's plan called for long-range interdiction from an observation post he'd identified on a ridge overlooking the pass. The distance from the proposed firing position to the kill zone was 4,100 meters, beyond anything that had ever been successfully attempted with a semi-automatic rifle, pushing into territory usually reserved for specialized bolt-action platforms. Maya ran the calculations, factoring in the elevation, the temperature variations at that altitude, the wind patterns typical for the region in mid-August, and the ballistic performance of the custom ammunition park had developed. The shot was theoretically possible, but it required perfect conditions and flawless execution. The margin for error was measured in centimeters at that range. "It's doable," Maya said finally, "but it requires 2 things: a spotter who can read the environment accurately and make real-time adjustments, and a shooter who can execute the shot with absolute precision. Hammond has the shooting ability, but he's operating alone now. He needs support." Tors studied the topographical map of the target area. "If we commit to this, we're not just providing technical advice. We're becoming operational participants. We'd need to insert into Afghanistan illegally, avoid both military and hostile forces, establish an observation post in denied territory, and conduct lethal operations without authorization. This is everything we're trained not to do." But everything Hammond's mission requires, Maya said. They looked at each other in the dim light of the cabin, both knowing they'd already made their decision hours ago. The conversation since then had just been confirmation, working through the logic to justify what their consciences had already determined. Torres picked up the satellite phone and dialed Sentinel Operations. Castellano answered immediately. "Captain Torres, I assume you have an answer." "We're in," Torres said. "But we have conditions. We want to understand the complete operational structure. We want veto authority over any operation we're directly involved in if we believe it violates fundamental ethical principles. And we want assurance that if we're captured or killed, efforts will be made to protect our families from repercussions." "Acceptable conditions," Castellano replied without hesitation. "You'll receive a complete operational briefing within the hour. As for family protection, the Sentinel Initiative maintains emergency funds and legal resources specifically for that purpose. We take care of our people, even when operations go wrong." "What's the next step?" Maya asked. "You're going to meet Hammond," Castellano said. "He's currently operating from a safe house in Pakistan, preparing for the Phase 3 operation I assume you've reviewed. He needs a spotter and a technical advisor. You're both flying out tonight from Denver. Private aircraft, false documents, complete operational security. You'll link up with Hammond in 48 hours. Torres and Maya exchanged glances. This was moving fast, faster than either had anticipated. But that was probably intentional. The longer they had to reconsider, the more likely doubt would creep in. "Understood," Torres said. "We'll be ready." "One more thing," Castellano added, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Once you're operational, there's no easy extraction. If you're compromised, if you're captured, the Sentinel Initiative cannot officially acknowledge your existence. We'll do everything possible to get you out, but discreetly. You'll be on your own in ways you've never experienced before. Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" Maya thought about the children in those operational reports, the ones who'd been rescued because someone had been willing to operate outside the system. She thought about her 6 years in the armory, the safe and predictable routine, and how hollow it seemed now compared to what Hammond was accomplishing. "We're certain," she said firmly. The flight from Denver took them first to a private airfield in Turkey, then via helicopter to a remote location in northern Pakistan, traveling under false identities as civilian contractors for an agricultural development NGO. The cover story wouldn't survive serious scrutiny, but it provided enough legitimacy to avoid casual questions. They traveled with minimal gear. The operational equipment would be provided at the safe house. They arrived at the safe house, a fortified compound hidden in a valley 30 kilometers from the Afghan border, just before dawn. The facility was more sophisticated than Maya had expected: satellite communications, power generators, secure storage for weapons and equipment, even a small medical facility. This wasn't a temporary base. It was a permanent operational hub. Hammond was waiting for them in the operations room, and Maya's first impression was shock at how much he'd changed from the photograph Torres had shown her. He was leaner, harder, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent months in harsh conditions. His eyes held intensity that went beyond focus. It was the look of someone who'd seen things that fundamentally altered their view of the world. "Torres," Hammond said, gripping his former teammate's hand, "I knew you'd figure it out. You always were too stubborn to let things go." "You could have told me," Torres said, though there was no anger in his voice, just the pain of betrayal among brothers. "I couldn't," Hammond replied simply. "You had to see enough to make your own choice. If I'd asked you directly, you'd have tried to talk me out of it or felt obligated to report me. This way, you followed the evidence to its logical conclusion." He turned to Maya. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, your research changed everything. That shot at 3,820 meters, it proved concepts I'd only hoped were possible. You made me into something beyond a conventional operator." Maya felt uncomfortable with the intensity of his gratitude. I wrote theoretical papers. You're the one who put them into practice. Theory and practice are inseparable, Hammond said. Without your intellectual framework, I'd still be limited to conventional engagement ranges. Now we can strike at distances our enemies believe make them safe. That psychological advantage is as important as the tactical advantage. He gestured to the map spread across the operations table. The convoy moves through this pass in 72 hours. Intelligence confirms 32 children, ages 6 to 14, being transported from Kunar province to a distribution facility in Chitral. If they reach Chitral, they'll be dispersed across Central Asia within days. We'll never find them all. This is our window. Tors studied the maps, his tactical mind immediately assessing the terrain. The firing position you've selected is exposed. No cover from counterfire, difficult egress routes if things go wrong. You're gambling everything on a single shot. Multiple shots, Hammond corrected. There are 4 vehicles in the convoy, each with armed guards. I need to disable the lead and rear vehicles first, trap the convoy in the kill zone, then systematically eliminate the guards while avoiding the transport vehicles where the children are held. It's a complex engagement sequence requiring precision across multiple targets at extreme range. Maya felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't a single impossible shot. It was a sustained engagement against multiple targets, all at distances beyond proven capability. That's asking for a lot. At 4,100 meters, every shot requires recalculation based on changing conditions. Wind shifts, temperature changes, even the rifle heating from previous shots affects performance. Which is why I need you, Hammond said, looking at her directly. Tors can spot and call wind, but you understand the physics at a level I never could. You can make the real-time adjustments that mean the difference between precision and failure, between saving those children and watching them disappear. Maya walked to the map table and studied the firing position and target area. The geometry was challenging, a downward angle of nearly 40 degrees, which complicated bullet drop calculations. Wind patterns in mountain valleys were notoriously unpredictable, channeled and shifted by terrain features. And they'd be shooting in the early morning when temperature inversions could create density layers that deflected bullets unpredictably. I'll need 3 hours with the rifle, Maya said. Test firing, data collection, building correction tables for every variable we can anticipate. And we'll need current weather data for the target area, updated every 6 hours until the operation. We have a meteorological station positioned near the pass, Hammond said. Real-time data, wind speed and direction at multiple elevations, temperature profiles, even humidity. Sentinel spares no expense on preparation. Tors walked the map with his finger, tracing insertion and extraction routes. We'll need a quick reaction force positioned for emergency extraction. If this goes wrong, if we're compromised, we can't fight our way out of Pakistan with just 3 people. Already arranged, Hammond confirmed. 8 contractors, former SEALs and Rangers, staged at an airfield 40 kilometers away with helicopters on standby. But understand, if we need them, the operation is blown and we'll be leaving Pakistan under hostile pursuit. He looked at both of them seriously. This is your last chance to back out. Once we insert tomorrow, we're committed. No communications with the outside world, no support beyond what Sentinel provides, no legal protection if we're captured. You'll be ghosts operating in sovereign territory without authorization. Maya thought about the 32 children in that convoy, imagining their fear and desperation. She thought about her comfortable life at Fort Benning, the routine she could return to if she walked away now. And she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be, someone who played it safe, or someone who acted when action was needed. I'm not backing out, she said firmly. Neither am I, Tors added. Hammond nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Then let's get to work. We have 72 hours to prepare for the most important shots of our lives. Operation began at 400 hours on a moonless morning in the Hindu Kush. Maya, Tors, and Hammond had inserted the previous night via helicopter, dropped 8 kilometers from their observation post to avoid detection. They'd hiked through darkness across brutal terrain, carrying 60 pounds of equipment each, reaching the firing position just as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern peaks. The observation post Hammond had selected was a natural rock formation at 3,800 meters elevation, providing both concealment and a clear line of sight to the mountain pass below. Maya set up immediately, establishing the shooting position with meticulous care. Every detail mattered: the rifle's cant, the bipod stability, even the position of Hammond's body to minimize movement during the shot sequence. Tors established the spotting position 2 meters to Hammond's left, his optics focused downrange while monitoring the meteorological data streaming to a ruggedized tablet. Wind at the firing position was calm, but the data showed variable conditions in the valley, crosswinds between 8 and 12 knots, shifting as the morning sun heated different faces of the mountains. Maya had spent the previous 2 days building correction tables for every conceivable condition, test firing the rifle until she understood its behavior intimately. Now she knelt beside Hammond, ready to make the real-time adjustments that would mean the difference between precision and catastrophe. At 6:37 hours, Tors spotted the convoy entering the pass, exactly on schedule. 4 vehicles, 2 technical trucks with mounted weapons leading and trailing, 2 transport trucks in the middle carrying their human cargo, 12 armed men visible, probably more inside the vehicles. The convoy moved slowly on the rough mountain road, vulnerable in ways they couldn't imagine. Range 4,140 meters, Tors called quietly, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they were about to do. Wind downrange variable, 8 to 11 knots, quartering from right to left. Temperature 22 degrees Celsius at firing position, estimated 18 in the valley. Barometric pressure 629 millibars. Maya's mind processed the data instantly, years of theoretical study suddenly finding practical application in the most critical moment of her life. She made rapid calculations, factoring in the bullet's 6-second flight time, the wind drift across that distance, the temperature differential's effect on air density, even the Coriolis drift caused by Earth's rotation. First correction, Maya said, her voice calmer than she felt. Elevation up 0.8 mils, windage left 2.3 mils, shoot when ready. Hammond made the adjustments with practiced precision, his breathing slow and controlled. The lead technical truck was approaching the optimal point in the kill zone, where the narrow road and steep terrain would make escape impossible. The rifle's report cracked across the mountainside. Maya started her mental countdown, 1001, 1002, tracking the bullet's flight time. At 1006, Tors called, hit, lead vehicle disabled, rolled into drainage ditch. Convoy stopped. The guards were reacting now, scrambling from vehicles, trying to identify where the shot had come from. At this distance, they had no chance of locating the firing position or returning effective fire, but Maya knew they'd be calling for reinforcement and trying to evacuate the children. Target 2, rear vehicle, Tors called. Range 4,165 meters, wind picking up 12 knots sustained. Maya recalculated instantly. Elevation up 0.9 mils, windage left 2.6 mils. Hammond adjusted and fired. Another 6-second eternity. Hit, rear vehicle disabled, convoy trapped. Now came the difficult part, eliminating the guards while avoiding any risk to the transport vehicles. Maya could see through her own optics as armed men positioned themselves around the trucks carrying children, using them as shields. The tactical situation was complex, requiring shots that were not just accurate but perfectly placed to avoid collateral damage. Over the next 12 minutes, Hammond fired 9 more shots. 9 targets, 9 hits, each requiring new calculations as conditions changed and the rifle heated from sustained use. Maya worked faster than she'd ever worked before, her mind processing variables and generating solutions with machine-like efficiency. Tors called wind and range. Hammond executed, and the guards fell one by one at impossible distances. The final shot eliminated the convoy commander who'd been trying to organize a response. As he dropped, the remaining guards broke, abandoning the vehicles and fleeing into the rocks. Through the optics, Maya watched as the transport truck sat alone in the pass, their engines still running, the children inside likely terrified but alive. Convoy neutralized, Tors confirmed. No remaining hostile personnel visible, children secure in transport vehicles. Hammond didn't celebrate. He immediately began breaking down the firing position, packing equipment with urgent efficiency. Extraction team is moving to the convoy location. They'll secure the children and transport them to a Sentinel-safe facility. We need to be off this mountain in 10 minutes. Pakistani military will have heard the shooting and they'll send helicopters to investigate. They moved fast, abandoning anything non-essential, following the extraction route Hammond had memorized. The hike back to the pickup zone was brutal, 3 kilometers of steep descent, racing against time and the approaching sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. The Sentinel helicopter was waiting, rotors already turning, and they threw themselves aboard as small arms fire kicked up dust around the landing zone. Pakistani border guards had spotted them, but too late. The helicopter lifted and banked away, disappearing into the terrain before pursuit could organize. 40 minutes later, they landed at the Sentinel compound where they'd staged the operation. Medical personnel checked them for injuries, while intelligence analysts confirmed the outcome. All 32 children recovered safely, convoy leadership eliminated, network operations in the region disrupted significantly. Hammond pulled Tors and Maya aside once the immediate chaos settled. His face showed exhaustion but also something else, a weight lifting, a burden shared instead of carried alone. 11 shots, Hammond said quietly. 11 impossible shots, every one of them successful because you were both here. Tors reading conditions I couldn't see. Maya calculating adjustments I couldn't make. This is what I couldn't do alone. Tors gripped his shoulder. What happens now to us, I mean? Hammond's expression turned serious. Now you decide whether this was one operation or the beginning of something more. Sentinel has targets across 6 countries, leadership, infrastructure, transportation networks. Each operation could save dozens of children, but each operation also takes you further from the lives you had before. Maya knew what he was asking. They'd crossed the line once. Crossing it repeatedly would transform them completely, turn them from soldiers into something else entirely, operators in a shadow war with no official recognition, no legal protection, no way back to normalcy. I need to think, Tors said. This operation, I can live with it, I can justify it, but making this my life, that's different. Take the time you need, Hammond said. Sentinel will extract you back to the States. You can return to your units, finish your service, move on. Or you can stay and help finish what we started. The extraction back to the United States took 3 days, routed through multiple countries to avoid surveillance. Tors and Maya flew commercial from Germany to New York, then drove to Washington, D.C., where they'd been ordered to report for what their commands had been told was a classified briefing on counter-trafficking operations. Instead, they met with Director Castellano in person at an anonymous office building in Arlington. The man was in his 60s, gray-haired and distinguished, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in positions of serious authority. Before we discuss your futures, Castellano said, I want you to understand what you accomplished. Those 32 children you helped rescue. They're safe now, receiving medical care and counseling at a Sentinel facility. Eventually, they'll be reintegrated with their families or placed with vetted foster organizations. They have futures now because of your actions. He showed them photographs, children's faces, some smiling tentatively, others still showing the trauma they'd experienced. Maya felt tears threatening as she looked at them, understanding viscerally that these were real human beings whose lives had been saved by decisions she'd made in fractions of seconds. The question before you now, Castellano continued, is whether you want to make this your mission going forward. Sentinel needs both of you. Captain Torres, your tactical expertise and leadership could coordinate operations across entire regions. Staff Sergeant Reeves, your ballistic knowledge is quite literally irreplaceable. No one else in the world combines your theoretical understanding with practical application ability. Torres spoke first. If I commit to this, I can't stay in the Army. I'd be living a double life, using my military position to support unauthorized operations. That's not who I am. We understand, Castellano said. We'd facilitate an honorable discharge, create cover employment, provide everything you need to maintain a normal appearance while conducting operations. Many of our best people have transitioned from active duty to sentinel work. Maya wrestled with her own decision. I spent 6 years building a career, establishing credibility, creating a life. And now you're asking me to walk away from all of it to become someone who doesn't officially exist. I'm asking you to choose between a comfortable life and a meaningful one, Castellano said bluntly. You're extraordinarily talented, Staff Sergeant. You could spend the next 20 years in military service, retire with a pension, and look back on a respectable career. Or you could spend those years saving children who would otherwise be lost to horrors you can barely imagine. The choice is genuinely yours. Torres and Maya requested 24 hours to decide. They spent that time walking around Washington, talking through implications and possibilities, imagining different futures. My father died bitter, Torres said as they sat on a bench overlooking the Potomac. He spent his life enforcing laws that couldn't touch the people who really mattered. I don't want that. I want to know I made a difference where difference was possible. But can we sustain this? Maya asked. 1 operation is adrenaline and moral clarity. 10 operations, 50. What does that do to a person over time? I don't know, Torres admitted. But I know what walking away would do. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if I made the coward's choice, wondering how many children suffered because I chose safety over service. They made their decision. 3 weeks later, Captain David Torres submitted his resignation from the Army, citing family considerations and opportunities in the private sector. He received an honorable discharge with commendations for his service. He moved to Denver and took a job with a security consulting firm, a Sentinel shell company that provided cover and allowed him to coordinate operations across Central Asia. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves's transition was more complex. She couldn't simply resign without drawing attention, so Sentinel arranged for her to receive orders to a classified program at a military research facility in New Mexico. On paper, she was developing next-generation weapons systems. In reality, she was providing ballistic expertise to Sentinel operations worldwide while maintaining her military cover. Hammond continued his operations in the field, but now with a support network he'd never had before. Over the next 18 months, the team conducted 47 operations across 8 countries, disrupting trafficking networks, rescuing children, and systematically dismantling the infrastructure that enabled modern slavery. Maya never returned to the armory at Fort Benning. Her workstation remained empty for 3 weeks before another weapons technician took over, calibrating scopes and teaching marksmanship to recruits who would never know her name. Her old life continued without her, barely missing her presence, while her new life demanded everything she had to give. On a cold morning 2 years after that first operation in the Hindu Kush, Maya stood on a rooftop in Istanbul, calculating corrections for a shot across the Bosphorus at 3,950 meters. Tors spotted beside her, Hammond prepared to fire, and 30 children waited in a compound below, unaware that their rescue was moments away. Maya's hands no longer smelled like gun oil from armory work. Now they smelled like high-altitude cold and the distinctive scent of custom ammunition. She'd been just a weapons tech once, content with routine and comfortable obscurity. Then a missing ranger had asked about a 3,820-meter shot, and she discovered what her talents really meant when applied with purpose and courage. She made the final calculation, called the correction, and Hammond fired. 6 seconds later, through her optics, she watched the target drop and knew that somewhere below, children were about to be free. Her old life seemed impossibly distant now, a different person's memories, a safe existence she'd outgrown. She'd chosen this path knowing the cost, and she'd pay that cost gladly for every child who walked out of darkness into light. Hit confirmed, Tors called. Target neutralized. Maya was already calculating the next correction, ready for whatever came next, living in the spaces between official action and necessary justice, making the impossible shots that saved lives no one else could reach. This was who she'd become. This was what her expertise truly meant, and she wouldn't change any of it.